Welcome back to another episode of the Mindsets podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jonny. Now, before I hand over, I just want to say thanks for coming back for another episode. We've been flying through with some different stories recently, from rowers to army veterans. And today we've got another very exciting episode with someone who does a mixture of sports all in one sport. So with that being as much introduction as I will do, Jonny, take over and introduce us to yourself.
Hi, well, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. I'm Jonny Jackson. I'm 24. I'm born and raised in Edinburgh, and then I went to Loughborough University. And now I'm based in London, where I spent some time in finance. And I've spent the last 10, 12 years doing triathlon, so swimming, cycling, and running.
Amazing. So before we get into any of that, this part of the episode is where we jump straight into show and tell. So I ask each guest to bring something along that they can show us and tell us about, and I'll see if I can get some more information out of them about what they bring along. Jonny's probably brought the biggest thing yet, which is quite exciting. And for any of you that are listening, whether that's on Spotify or Apple, you can go and find this on YouTube if you want to watch it at mindsets_podcast. Otherwise, I will be doing an audio description of what we're looking at. But Jonny, do you want to show us what you've brought?
Yeah, absolutely. So This is my Great Britain tri-suit. This was for 2020, I raced in 2021 in Austria. So it was actually for the European aquathon, swim run, elite under 23 race. So it was in COVID, which actually made it a lot trickier, and sadly, like, my family couldn't come out and watch. But yeah, it's very quick. So it's made of it's a hydrodynamic sort of material. So it, in the water without a wetsuit, it's still very quick.
Can I have a feel of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this suit is very much like what you've seen on TV is like a GB sort of leotard's the wrong word, but it's a skin tight piece of clothing. Yeah. I guess feel wise, I'm trying to see if it feels like anything that they banned from the swimming like years ago at the Olympics, but it feels very dry, which I imagine is the intention, is it takes all that water off you as soon as you get out of the water. But that is really cool. Do you normally have that like hung up, or is it just stashed in a drawer somewhere for now?
Well, I've had about 6 tri-suits across the years from like Scotland, Italian racing team, Spanish racing team, so Scotland, yeah. So I will get them hung up on a wall at some point when I get around to it. But yeah, normally it's just stuffed in the drawer just now.
And normally do they last a given amount of time, or do you just get a new one for each race that you do?
They last a certain amount of time, and they start to wear and tear. Like, this one's not had its day yet, but the material starts to sort of fade away, and it becomes less. Yeah, I mean, you'll see it crinkly, and it's not as fast as it once was. So maybe every 10, maybe get with a season, and then you probably want a new one.
Does it, again, a bit like getting a new pair of shoes? When you put a new one on, do you notice the difference in how it feels?
It's definitely a placebo effect. Absolutely, you definitely notice when you put it on first and you get in the water, you do feel like you're going a lot quicker than you are. But no, I think I'd say the first time is probably uncomfy. Second, third time, then it's like, it feels really good to actually racing.
I was gonna say my main fear of putting something like that on would probably be like chafing.
Yes,
because especially if you're getting out of the water and then you're like running and riding.
Yeah,
are they pretty chafe proof in that?
I wouldn't say they're the comfiest things in the world. They're designed to be obviously quite skin tight, so they can, especially around the arms and the legs, they can, and the groin area. With some of them have padding for cycling, and they aren't particularly comfy. But they do look good, and they do the job. So sometimes speed is more important than comfort, I would say, for the shorter racing anyway, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, understood. Well, I mean, like I said, that's the biggest thing, I guess, because you're a tall guy as well, that we've had on the podcast, but also some Great Britain stash is always going to be truly welcomed on here. So thank you very much for bringing that in. Now, what I would ordinarily do is I would then use that to figure out how we get from where we were when we were younger to where we are today, and why you've brought that along. However, before we do that, I have a show and tell. So I did this a couple of weeks ago because the Mindsets podcast branding has started to change, and that continues today. Jonny is currently holding an absolutely lovely drinking vessel, and I'm holding the other one. So we could cheers. So we've got some mugs and they work. We both just had a drink out of them. It's got the Mindsets branding on it, and this is just another piece of the puzzle for the studio, I guess, where we're recording, and it kind of looks like this is more serious than it ever has been. So there's the mug with the logo on it, and you'll be seeing that pretty much in every episode now. The beauty of these mugs, unlike the glasses that you might have seen us drinking out of beforehand, is you have no idea what we're drinking. So it could be water, it could be something like coffee, it could be far more alcoholic or not allowed. You'll never know, but you'll probably be able to tell by the end of the episode what it is. Anyway, enough rambling on about mugs and trying to take up time doing that. Let's get into your story. So we've had a bit of a discussion, and you didn't actually, funny enough, start when you were younger trying to swim, run and bike everywhere you went. You're a little bit more normal in, playing a bit of football and that sort of thing. What was your sort of discovery of sport with family and everything like that?
So I think my parents were always very sporty. My dad was more ball sports, tennis, cricket, badminton, golf, and football rather than the more endurance sort of sports. And mum ran a bit. But when I was 5, I went to a swim club for a few years, but just more to do the Kellogg's badges that probably most kids have, and then went to primary school and played football, and then was lucky enough to go to an academy for 3 years in Edinburgh. And then the changing point was from football, I loved it, and then we got new coaches, and then I changed position from centre mid to right back, and I just started to not enjoy it. The training wasn't as fun, and at that time we also moved schools, so I was very lucky. I went to a very good school in Edinburgh, and that actually had cross country and a triathlon club. So from football days where I played, I think, 5 times a week, and got to travel the country and went to Ireland for a few tournaments and stuff. So that was great fun. And, signing a contract at 12 years old is always cool, and getting the kit and playing Everton and all those teams was great fun. But then moving on from that, after we stopped enjoying it, definitely, I think the enjoyment factor is the most important, especially when you're that young. I think once you get to 16, 17, yeah, you've obviously got to love it, but I think it more becomes performance related depending on what you're doing. But at 12, you should be loving everything you're doing.
Especially because I guess most of your friendship network when you're that age is coming from sport like that, if you're spending so much time doing it.
Definitely.
But you didn't stay with football. You did end up moving into triathlon. So how did that come about?
So as a centre mid, I feel like you're obviously running up and down the pitch, and naturally I was just quite fit and could be able to run, I think when we were under 13, it was 60 minutes to games. And then the cross country, when we moved school and we got the chance to do cross country, I absolutely loved it. Just loved that competition and being able to compete week in, week out. And then did Scottish schools, and we were lucky enough our school team managed to win quite a few titles over the years. And then at the same time started doing the triathlon club after. I don't want to be cliche and say like the Brownlee brothers inspired after 2012, but definitely had an impact, I would say. And then started doing swimming, and so it was a swim run club at school. And then started doing some triathlon racing, joined a triathlon club, and then the next sort of 10, 12 years went by, and that's where I am today.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned it. I didn't have to bring it up myself, but the Brownlee brothers, twins.
No, they're brothers.
That's what I've been confused about, because they look like they're identical twins, and they both race in triathlon. They've both had an extremely successful career in triathlon, and there's some similarity in the fact that you've grown up with a brother. You do actually have a twin brother though, and I guess you were both competing as you grew up.
Yeah, absolutely. So Forbes and I have competed at every single thing in our whole lives, from school grades to university exams to every sporting competition, whether that's table tennis on holiday or going out for a run and, again on holiday, and just, I think every single thing, whether it's like doing times tables on an app or everything you can imagine, we have competed at. But it's definitely has made me a better athlete in general. I'm probably a person, because I hate losing, so it's always good to have someone there who's not going to let you forget it if you do lose. And I think over the years, he was always better at swimming and cycling. I was always better at running. So that made for an interesting race, and there was definitely a few times where it came down to a sprint finish, and I may or may not have tried to cut him up on a few races. He did get the better of me there, but overall it's been great. I think having someone to push you, and also I think training on your own is very difficult, and if you've got someone who always wants to, always willing to go and do the hard sections especially, then it makes life a lot easier.
For sure. So when you were 14, you'd kind of got more into triathlon and you decided to trial for Scotland. Did you both do that, or was that just you?
Yeah, so the event was basically the way that I think British Triathlon, Scottish Triathlon, England Triathlon worked at that time was you had a points matrix from your swim time and your run time. And in order to go to the event, you had to be able to do a certain time. There's basically a minimum standard. And I just got, I think I got 2 seconds below the minimum standard. So for 200 meters freestyle, you had to be able to do sub 3 minutes. So for any swimmers out there, they know that's very slow. And it shouldn't be particularly difficult for someone that swims a lot. And I got 2:58, and then on the day I remember doing 2:53, but at that time I was 30 seconds off what I needed to be to get into the foundation squad, it was known at the time. Run was there, it was no problem. So that year, my brother was about 5 seconds quicker than me in the swim, and about 5 seconds slower on the run. So overall we both didn't make it, but it was good because we saw where everyone else was at from Scotland our age and what the standard for the next few years was. And there's literally an Excel sheet where you could see what times you need to get certain points to get in the squad. So that was a very good motivator because it meant, well, I know where I'm at. Let's see how if I can beat the people on the squad, and how much I can improve in the next year before the trial goes again. So I think in a year I managed to get down 31 seconds, I think.
Damn.
And then I think I beat half of the squad. So that was always nice. And I was actually, funny enough, the year after, the coaches asked Forbes and I to give a speech at the next trial for all that, because they told us we'd got on for the next year. So they told us to give a speech about,
not giving up,
but what you can achieve if you put your mind to it, what the worst bits, but more importantly the best bits of being on the squad were. And the worst bits were definitely the punishment if you were late to anything. We got caught in the jacuzzi after swimming, so we got 100 press ups. I think we got caught staying up late, and then we got after a brutal swim, we had to go into the land room and do this 20-minute horrible core workout. So that was the funny side of it, the worst side, getting the punishments. But overall, it was just an amazing experience. We had 5 weekend camps up in the north of Scotland, and then we had 1 or 2 summer camps in Portugal, France, and Spain. So it was incredible.
Got the chance to get a bit of travelling and a bit of sun as well there.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. I think our coldest camp was in Aberfeldy near Aberdeen, and it was 1 degree. There was snow on the ground. So it made for an interesting camp compared to the year after. We went to Carcassonne in France in the French Pyrenees, and it was heatwave 38. So it was quite
very opposing.
Very, very different. Yeah.
When you're that age and you're training in triathlon, is it like other sports where it kind of ramps up in terms of distances or anything like that? Are you doing the same distances from when you were 13, 14 to, competing as an adult?
No, so they have, I can't remember, I couldn't tell you the exact distances off the top of my head for 10-year-olds now, but they basically increment it 100 meter extra swim, or they double it every sort of year you go up age group. So I think from 15, 16 you're doing, or 13, 14 to 16 you're doing super sprint. So it's 400 meter swim, 10k bike, 2.5k run, and once you get past 16 it's sprint. I think that's right. Don't quote me on that, and then you go to 750 meter swim, 20k bike, 5k run, and post 18 you'll do Olympics if you're doing the short course elite sort of drafting stuff. But yeah, so it is a natural sort of progression, and on the training side that probably tends to do the same. You naturally gradually build up, because you can't just jump. When you're full time, you'll train 30 hours, 35 hours a week. As a 16-year-old, A, you don't have the time to do that because you've got school, but B, your body probably couldn't deal with it. And I think a lot of triathletes find that because the run has obviously so much impact on your joints and knees, and you're growing, so people get shin splints and various injuries from overuse. You can probably load the swim and bike a lot more than you can on the run, especially through those like, you know, puberty when you're growing a bit and one day you've grown like a foot and you're so skinny, you need to put on more weight again. And I think that's quite a challenging time to train. I think it's a lot easier for boys than girls, I think, in general. But I think because of the people, and we had great coaches on the camps, and the friends that, you know, I trained with there are friends for life now. And I actually met one of them when I was out in Dubai a few weeks ago, and I was back in Scotland on the weekend and bumped into him in a bike shop, another guy. So everyone's still within the sport. There's a lot of people that have gone to Commonwealth Games and are off racing at that, you know, the highest level, and there's a lot of people that sort of just took a different path after. But yeah, overall, I'd say you naturally increase training with the racing distance because that makes sense. But triathlon is definitely, because it's an endurance sport, I think 28, I'd say you peak typically. Sports scientists might tell me otherwise, but that's what I would probably say.
Yeah, I think a lot of that, there's a lot that I've been reading recently about why that happens, because you look at most sports and you think about some of the best performance athletes in terms of things like football or those sorts of sports tend to be younger. But then there's a degree with endurance where it comes to experience, and sometimes it's experience of the pain and knowing how to cope with that. But also there's a lot of physiological and biological things that happen at that point in your life that mean that you theoretically can go on a little bit longer. One of the things I want to clarify, which I should have done earlier for anyone that doesn't know, what are the Olympic race distances in a triathlon?
Yeah, so for the Olympic Games, since it was introduced in Sydney in 2000, it is a 1.5k swim, a 40-kilometer bike, and a 10k run. Now, if you're old school, that's like 0.9 miles, 25-mile bike, 6 and a bit miles run for anyone that works in the mile system.
Okay, so you would have started doing that distance, you said, after the age of 18?
Yeah, I did that first distance at 18, yeah.
So around that time as well is when you kind of finish up your standard studies and you start looking towards university. And you made a fantastic choice of university, not biased at all, but you found your way down in the Midlands at Loughborough. What was the reason or thinking behind Loughborough?
That's a great question. So I looked at Bath. I applied to Glasgow, Oxford, and Durham actually. So Durham was my first choice. And obviously Durham's a great uni, but I'm so glad that I didn't get the grades to get in. So my offer for Loughborough was AB and Durham was 3 A's, and I got 2 A's and a B, which meant I went to Loughborough. And that was, you know, when people classic say like it always works out for the best. And I could not have been happier going to Loughborough. I did 4 years there, and it was by far some of the best years of my life. And I don't think Durham's a great uni. I just don't think it was probably suited towards myself. But I think Loughborough was brilliant because I did economics, but I think it combined a good academic uni with the best sporting facilities in the UK. And it's also British Triathlon's one of the performance centres, so you have the option, we have the ability to access all that stuff as well.
You didn't go alone though, did you? Your brother also went to Loughborough. So what I want to know what the arrangement was there. Did he have Loughborough as his first choice? Was he loyal, or how did that work?
He also had Durham actually. Okay. Yeah. So Forbes always beat me at school. He always got straight A's and I always got 1B. And then in final year A levels are the equivalent for Scotland. We both got the same 2 A's and a B. And then it was the first time we're like, right, well, we're both off to Loughborough. And then I was unfortunate. He got an Athlete Halls, which was as you probably know, the really nice new block looking onto the athletics track. And I was stuck in the, anyone that's been to the Midlands in Loughborough, you will see there's a tower block, quite literally a tower block.
The eyesore of the Midlands, almost.
Yeah, it's not a particularly pretty building to look at. And I was stuck on the 15th floor there. But as you know, it was good. We had obviously lived away from each other and separate friends as well. And yeah, some of my friends from Towers are lifelong friends and still in contact and still meet up with them, and they're great people. Which is also quite nice, I think, to switch off from the sporting side when you're not, obviously triathlon and most sports take up a lot of time. So when you're not in that environment, when you're training or thinking about racing, like these people, they understand you do sport, but they also fundamentally don't really care because it's not, they don't understand it enough to care, which is quite refreshing because if you had a bad session or a bad race and you come back, they ask you about it because they're interested enough, but they don't there's no longer a conversation. It's like 5 minutes and move on.
The subject will change and you can take your mind off it yourself.
Yeah, they'd much rather know about, oh, are we going to the Griff this evening, the pub, or are we, anything like that, rather than let's go into a 2-hour conversation about why the race went wrong. Which, again, has its pros and cons, but definitely was good.
Despite what you've kind of presented there as the sort of conversations you'd be having with your peers, you did actually do quite well when you're at uni, though. You've told me that you got 7 Bucks medals.
Yeah.
I think I've written it down. You got 3 golds, 3 silvers, and a bronze. Were they all across the same sort of triathlon discipline? And then was it one particularly good season and then there was a few that weren't, or was it pretty consistent throughout?
So the triathlon was lucky. We could do 4 events. You had Bucks sprint distance, you had Bucks Olympic distance, you had Bucks duathlon, so run, bike, run, and then you had the biathlon, so the modern biathlon, which is swim and then a run. And you could also win medals for the team. So every team consisted of 3 athletes from various unis. So I won 2 individual medals and then 5 team. And my best season was probably 2022, the year I graduated. So that was always a goal of mine, to win an individual Bucks gold medal. I think many athletes that go to uni want to win. It's just a nice title and the medal looks cool, so it's always good to have. And I'd gone away. I'm not too proud of it, but I went away to a camp and forgot about uni for a month in Fuerteventura with the Swiss squad for a month before the race. So I went away in February and came back in March, and it was mid-March the race. And that was probably one of my goals when I went away, just to get as fit as I could. And when I was training, when it was the harder sessions, it was just think about that race and executing that race. And I was I didn't actually think I'd done it, but I was fortunate enough to pull it off when it came.
And what that ended up doing was kind of opening a new potential chapter, I guess, when the end of university came. So you had your degree, and you had given kind of the standard lifestyle of working and training on the side a bit of a go with an internship, but then you thought, I might as well actually have a bit of a crack at this. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So my coach, I was very fortunate. My coach was very high up in triathlon and could open a lot of doors, and gave me the opportunity to go in the Swiss camp. And then we talked through it, and he just said, don't worry about training, just get your degree. If you want to get a first, make sure you get whatever, academic achievement you want, make sure you get it. So that's what we did. And then did the internship in Edinburgh in finance, and it was good. I lived at home, trained a bit, but just did that to, bulk up the CV a bit. And they gave me a grad offer, and it was like, well, I'm always going to regret this now if I don't give it a go, because, you only regret the things in life you didn't do, not the things you did. So I spoke to them and said, can I push the offer back a year? And they were very good and said yes. So that was easy, because it was almost not a safety net, because I actually didn't want to do it anyway. But it was still nice to have, jobs are tough to get, so it's always nice to have one. So yeah, then I set off and had a year out. Well, yeah, I tried to have a year out doing full-time triathlon. So.
What's it like being a full-time athlete all of a sudden?
It's tough. I feel like a lot of people think it's easy because you get to go to, I lived in Spain for 3 months, and you get to, you just train and sit in the sunshine. And like the reality is, that might be the case for some sports, I don't know, but for triathlon, it was very much, we train 3 times a day, occasionally 4, and in between you'd eat, nap, and that would be it. Like, you wouldn't ever go in the sun when you're not training, because obviously if you're in the sun, it just drains energy. Don't get me wrong, it was amazing. It's an amazing experience. It's just very tiring, obviously, physically and mentally, when you're pushing yourself that hard day in, day out. I think being outside for that much is great. Obviously, you get to be in nature, and where I was in Fuerteventura and Lanzarote, some epic cycles, but I think probably an average week could be for us 25k swim, 400k on the bike, 70-80k run a week with 2 gyms.
That's outrageous load.
Gets you fit quick.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I'd have probably a day off every month. So it was quite, it was good.
Just the one day off?
Yeah, so my coach was very much, I know I've been lucky, he was a world-class coach, still is a world-class coach, so he was very much, if you get the load and the intensity right, then you really shouldn't need a full day off. if you get it right.
I guess that's the thing as well with a lot of sports is like if someone listening to this thought, okay, I want to do triathlon, this is how I'm going to be the best, I need to do that schedule. If you did that, you'd get injured. And you'd also hate it because taking yourself from zero to that level of load is really difficult. But also, to a degree, once you get to that level of load and your body has adapted to it, it's kind of just you have adapted, you can continue doing it, and you probably need a rest just to make sure that you're not introducing the idea of any injuries. So I guess that does actually make sense. And that's one of the things that, again, being a pro athlete, so many people grow up wanting to do it. And then if you actually need the ins and outs of it, because it kind of relates back to what you said when you are 12 and, you know, you really need to be doing something for fun. When you go pro, you have to understand that there's going to be days where it's really not fun, but it is now your job. And yeah, you probably still will enjoy that more than some other jobs. But it's that physical and mental toll that it takes that I think it's good that you've brought up, because it's not one or the other. You can't just be like, oh, they must be tired all the time. Yeah, they're tired, but mentally, as you said, pushing yourself every day. Because if you take one of those days off, either you can actually get yourself injured by not pushing yourself, but also the like presence that will have in your mind for God knows how long can be really detrimental in like a worse way than if you just pushed yourself that one time one day.
Yeah.
So you then came back from Spain.
Yeah.
And kind of you did some more competing, but I'm aware that things were a little bit different. Do you want to kind of, I like to present the next part of the story and let you take it from there. I think you know what I'm getting at here, but do you want to tell everyone kind of what went on there?
Yeah, so I went out to Fuerteventura from all of February and came back, raced basically I think it's the oldest triathlon in Spain actually. It's called the Volcano Triathlon Olympic Distance at Club de Santa, which is a great race, so I'd recommend anyone doing that. It's tough, but it's good fun. And that was at the end of the 8-week block. But I managed to pick up, so in those islands, the Canary Islands, from the Morocco, the Sahara Desert, the storm comes over and it's called La Calima. That's what they call it, and you literally can't see 50 meters in front of you because the sand's so bad, sandstorm. And we got hit by that, and then my chest just didn't respond very well to it, so I had a few days off, got some antibiotics, seemed to fix everything, and then raced really well, was very happy, managed to lead the swim, biked well, and ran probably the best I've ever ran. So it was all in all very good, and you know, my brother and dad came out to watch, and there was a lot of friends from uni there and stuff, so it was a great fun. Came back to Scotland and raced in St Andrews actually, and then didn't feel too good, just nothing, didn't think about it, just thought I'd be fatigued from travelling and everything else and getting used to sadly the cold climate again. And then a few weeks later, I just did not feel good at all. And we had it's called the British Performance Assessments, that is to do with the British Super Series, and you have to do them. And my chest wasn't right at all, but I knew I had to do them, so I did the swim. It's a broken up day. One day's a swim, the next day's a bike run off of the position of your swim. And I did the swim awfully. And then the next day, I took my inhaler far too many times because I was trying to clear my chest, and it did not work. I raced horrendously. And you know, I couldn't even find my bike in transition. I was just all over the place. Anyway, did awful in that, and was like, right, I'm going to work out what's wrong. And then about a few weeks after that, I was in Loughborough. I just pumped up a friend's tyre, and I got a really sharp pain in my chest and was like really, really out of breath. And for a fit 22-year-old at the time, that shouldn't happen to anyone really.
Well, also, just to specify, because I think we've been talking a lot about triathlon, but we haven't necessarily given times. Was this going on in March?
This was March 2023.
So I have down here, because I did some digging, that in March 2023, you ran a park run 5K in 15 minutes, 41 seconds. Yeah. So like, for anyone that knows about 5K times, again, mine and I run relatively consistently is around like 20. So that's the level of fitness that we're talking about. So I would be surprised if I suddenly got sharp chest pains, let alone someone that cardiovascularly and endurance wise is at that level. So yeah, pumping up a tire, feeling out of breath and having some chest pain.
Yeah, so I went to urgent care in Loughborough, and then they took me to Leicester, and then it was a case of they thought I had a blood clot, so they had a bit of a panic around wheeling me around the hospital, thinking I had that. They injected me with blood thinner, and I'm to be honest, I was trying to make light heart of the situation. I remember the nurses being quite worried, and I said, like, what's the worst case? And they were like, well, blood clots can be fatal. And I just said, well, I'm not dead yet, so it can't be that bad. They did not take that well. That went down like a pint of cold sick. That did not go down well. And then they still didn't really know what was wrong, but then they were like, right, you're fine, just monitor it, don't do anything for a few days. And then I decided to just go private and just get the chest and heart tested. And then eventually after May, June time, I'd had a cardiac heart imaging. I'd had CT scans where they'd put, I don't know if anyone's ever had a CT scan with contrast, but they inject this contrast dye into you to see, I don't know the medical thing, but apparently 3 things can happen. You either feel like you're going to pee yourself, you either get really hot, or you feel like a tingling sensation. And I felt super hot for like 5 seconds. It was quite a cool experience. But and yeah, they did all sorts of, I sat on an exercise bike, I had a mask on with an ECG, and then I had after about 5 minutes, that test should have been 30 minutes. And after about 5 minutes, they just found an anomaly in the ECG. So more digging, and eventually they worked out that it was a heart condition called myocarditis, which is inflammation of the muscle of the heart, which only really goes away with rest. I think anyway, that's what they told me. But any doctors listening, I'm sorry if I've been medically incorrect. But so that whole summer was basically a lot of waiting, a lot of unknown, and a lot of golf. That kept me. It was the only sport I could probably do without doing anything and being in pain. So that's mainly what I spent my summer last year doing.
My main question, so I guess to relate, you won't necessarily know about this, listeners might not know about this. I've mentioned it, I think, in one episode beforehand, but in September last year, I had an incident actually on it was my first day in this office. I knew everyone, so it wasn't anxiety or anything like that. I suddenly got extremely hot and I passed out. And first of all, great way to make a first impression with people you don't know. But I immediately then was taken to hospital. It was very similar. All the nurses and everything were very concerned. And at first I was very much like, I'm fine. But I guess we should probably get this, ruled out. I know in the family there's been some heart stuff as well. So it's like, okay, let's make sure we're all good. And then I was presented with this term myocarditis as well. I ended up getting cleared and it just got put down as a freak event, which is good and bad because it means it's had no implication on me like driving or anything, which other things could have involved if it was like epilepsy or anything like that. But it was a bit of a worrying time. And for those 6 weeks, I was very much like I can't do anything. I wasn't allowed to drive. I wasn't actually allowed to do any form of sport. They wouldn't let me do anything while they were running all these tests. And for me, that was terrifying. And I wasn't a pro athlete. That wasn't my life. It was very much a hobby. It's clearly a passion now. But for you, going from the time where you're kind of still happy-go-lucky in the hospital, like I'm fine, did it feel like things changed overnight? Or was it still very much like, this is just a case of resting and then we'll be fine?
It was definitely, I feel like it's one of those situations when you're actually in the moment, you don't really take a step back and process the whole thing because you're like, well, I'll just get through it, however long that takes. So I think I used to wake up in pain quite a lot, and even just if I've had to quickly jog to the shops to get something, you'd notice it. And just feeling tired all the time. I think, especially when you're in your young 20s or as a young adult, you should have a lot of energy, sleep well, and I just couldn't do any of that stuff. But yeah, at the same time, I think when you're always in pain, you'll always have something wrong. When you get cleared and you're not in pain, you're so grateful for your health. I think the most important thing in life is health. If you don't have your health, you really can't do anything else. And also, I feel like I was very lucky. I had great family, friends, coach. The support network is great. And, I'm classic, but golf definitely helps. You just go out, you don't think about anything else but trying to get a ball. In my case, quite badly, bad scores. But, sadly, I played far too much golf and my handicap's still not very good. So, a lot of work to be done there. But, yeah, you definitely appreciate not being in pain a lot more after dealing with a prolonged period of pain, I would say.
So when was it that you were, I guess, given the all clear to kind of get back to doing what you wanted to do?
Mid August.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how did it go in terms of your approach, both mentally and physically, in terms of getting back to where you once were fitness-wise?
Oh, I knew I was not going to get back to that. I feel like when I was training 3 times, roughly it was 21 sessions a week. And that's like your job at that point. You don't have time to do anything else really. So that was gone. That, it was lovely. It was great to be that fit and get to that level. But it's a case of, I just started work as well in London. So it was more a case of, how can I fit this into my routine? And let's see how quick I can get back to a decent level. And I thought I need to do, but I don't know if everyone else finds this, but having an event and a deadline to work towards, if that's 6 weeks, 4 weeks, at least you've got something you're working towards. So I decided I thought, because I'd always raced the short stuff, 5K, 10K, Olympic sprint distance, I thought, well, I've never really done a half marathon. So I've got no benchmark as to how good I ever would have been at it when I was fit. So I did Windsor half marathon in September, early September, mid-September. More it's just I really miss racing and, having the nerves and doing it in the post-race buzz. So I did that, and following a few weeks after, I did Victoria Park in London with a few people from work, both from work actually, and it was great fun. I just loved being back to it, and I surprised myself. I think if you've done endurance sport and an aerobic sport for that long, at 12 years, there's, I guess, a residual fitness, I would say, is there, that you don't, well, maybe up until you're 30, you don't lose. I don't want to comment for after that, but yeah, I was very surprised at how relatively quick I went given the circumstance in the last 6 to 8 months before.
So when I said that, you very much went like, oh, that was gone. Was it as clear in your mind as that, or was this something that you kind of came to terms with throughout the process of recovering?
So I think it was, so after, when they got my results back from the cardiac MRI, doctor called me and went, it's myocarditis, you've got some, I think it's called fibrosis, so like scar tissue from that, and they said it could have been from numerous reasons, whether that was COVID, they said potentially the COVID vaccine, they said you had a bacterial infection from the sandstorm, and if it just didn't clear, then that would be a reason that would have happened. So I don't know, I feel like once you hear a doctor say to you, you can go back to exercise, and it's been, maybe 5-6 months by that point. So I feel like you're ready to get back into it anyway. So when they said, right, it's been this, there's nothing now wrong with you, you'll just have a bit of scar tissue on your heart, I was like, right, perfect, I'm getting back into it. And I also feel like by the end, you don't feel good, but it's because you've not done any exercise in so long, like proper exercise. Like obviously walking, golf is good, but it's not the same as, that dopamine rush or runner's high people say you get, or going for a swim or a bike or the gym, going weights, whatever it is. You don't get the same effect by just walking, from me personally anyway. So I was like, right, I'm getting back into it. So I remember as soon as I got told I was fine, I think the next day I just went for a 5K run, super easy. And I was like, right, day one, here we go. Let's see what we can do. And yeah, that was sort of the way it went. And I think I got more into the gym because it was, I guess, less continuous exercise, more you could do a set of 8 reps and take a break and then go back, and rather than just running for an hour and constantly having your heart rate all the time up there.
Amazing. So I guess we've kind of gone through a bit of your journey there. There are some specific questions that I don't have for you, but other people do. Again, for anyone that might be new here, on the Mindsets podcast, we like it to be a bit more of a community. So on the Instagram story, I will every time I have a guest coming on, I like to put up an opportunity for listeners to ask questions, which means that you guys get a bit of information about the person that's coming on. And if there's something in particular you want to ask that person, this is your opportunity. So I have 3 questions today. And question 1 comes from Gwen. Gwen has asked, has there ever been a time you wanted to quit or stop what you were doing in terms of training? And how did you bounce back from that?
I'd say no, there's never been a time I wanted to quit the sport. There's definitely been lots of times where I want to quit in a session. If you have a really hard threshold swing or I remember I threw up once in Loughborough. It was a sprint speed session, and it was long recoveries. It was like 650 meters flat out with like 5 minutes rest in between off the blocks, and I finished till sixth. Like halfway through, I was in such a bad way, and shaking trying to get out of the pool. And then I think a lot of athletes probably find that you just want to stop in that moment because you're in so much pain, but then that's where the gains are made. And then actually after, as soon as I got finished that session, I tried to cool down and had to immediately get out to the side of the pool and just throw up. So there's been definitely sessions where I've wanted to stop or quit, but in terms of actually stop training, I would say no.
When you're in that moment, and this is something that with my own discovery more recently of endurance sports, is there a specific phrase or thing that comes into your head when you're right at that point of deciding whether to stop or go on?
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably some bad language involved at some point, and it's like, just, get a grip. Like, you're in a privileged position to be able to do that. A lot of people would die to be in your position and have that. I guess, the cliche phrase is, opportunities or pressures of privilege. Having that opportunity to put yourself in a pressure situation. Like, it's my choice. Like, no one forced me to get in the pool or go for a hard run or do a track session. That was my choice. So I feel like I should deal with the consequences. I know it's going to be a hard session. I know there's going to be, especially probably from like halfway onwards to the end is going to be the real killer. So yeah, I think mainly just remember that's where if you want to finish well in a race or I think maybe it's a bad example, but I think if you could be in the fittest, physical, mental place you've ever been and you still not win. But that's not because of you, that's because you can only control what you do. So especially in triathlon, you could get a puncture, you could get dunked at a buoy, someone could give you concussion in the swim, you could crash, so anything could go wrong. So it's about giving yourself the opportunity to have the chance to get as high up in the race as you can. It's not about actually, if I guess like sprinting's a bit different, obviously, because it's your own lane. No one can really interfere to that extent. But yeah, triathlon's a place where anything can happen, literally anything can happen. So it'll be interesting to see the Olympics and what happens. But no, I would say just remember that it's your choice, and if you do want to get to, I got a decent level in sport, and there's a lot, the Olympians and going to major games is obviously the dream of professional athletes, and they just day in, day out make sure that they can push themselves hard. And also I think not being too hard. By the end of the season, you are mentally probably more tired than physically, and I think though that's really hard when you've only got like 1 or 2 races left, and like you've got off season coming. Even if you've had a great season, you're still you're tiring towards the end. And even normally, let's say it's 10 100s in the pool, we get to 7 and you really, really want to stop. And maybe sometimes stopping on 8 is the right call if you've got a race quite soon and you're not that recovered. But overall, no.
Fantastic. Well, there you go, Gwen. And the next question comes from Isaac, who you know personally. Yeah. So his question is actually, how has your transition been from a professional sport to a bit more of a corporate environment?
Yeah, it's definitely a strange one. I think the biggest change is obviously when you do triathlon and you're doing 3 sessions a day, you're outside basically at least half the day, if not more. So, and you're training all the time, so you feel good, then you get to eat as much as you can when you're recovering, and you get to sleep in the day, which obviously when you're doing a corporate job, you don't have the luxury of. It's been around different people, because obviously athletes typically all have a very similar mindset, and everyone's sort of working towards similar goals, whether that's qualifying for races or, medaling at championships, whatever it is. Whereas the corporate world's obviously very much, in the company that Isaac and I worked for, it was very much money driven. How much money can you make that day, or so I think it's just getting used to. I mean, the probably the biggest thing would be I was around everyone that's very similar ages, whereas you go to the corporate world, you're at the bottom and you've got 40, 50-year-olds men and women who sort of run the business, and then you take orders from them or listen to them. But it's similar in a sense, because you do get training, which is essentially the same as sport. It's just in a different field. So you get training, and then you listen to essentially your coach or mentor or boss or whatever you want to say, and then I think it's been confined to like 9. Okay, we weren't 9 till 5, but if you want to take that typical 9 till 5 and just not having the freedom, because at the end of the day, if I wanted to go for a 3-hour bike ride and I wanted to take a cafe stop, I could do that. And my coach might be like, why did you take a cafe stop? But he's not going to have a go at me. Whereas you can't just leave work for an hour and a half because you wanted to go for a run or a swim. And you just don't have the time to speak to your friends as much, your family as much. Definitely a weird transition, I would say. But yeah, overall, I think it's part of growing up. I think at some point, every athlete, whether it's Usain Bolt or whoever, Michael Phelps, definitely, they all had to transition. Now, obviously, the higher up you make it in sport, the less of a transition it is, because you've probably made the money, the contacts, and people want to hire you for broadcasting, modelling, advertising, whatever it is, or pay you to go to speak at events. So I think if you get to the top of the top, it's not, but for the 95% of other people that are professional athletes, they will do a normal job, if you want to call it that, at some point.
I also want to use this opportunity to explain that is why you have completely outdressed me for this podcast, because you've basically come from work as well, right?
Well, I'm not actually working at the moment, but I had a few meetings in London. That's why I had to put a...
He's suited and booted, and I'm here in shorts and a t-shirt, and pretty much what I'd be ready to go to the gym in. Looking comfortable. I'm on brand though. That's all it is. So the last question comes from Alice, and you've actually teed this one up a little bit. In something you said earlier. So it's the Olympics this year. You said it'd be interesting to see how they get on in triathlon. And then you also said at a separate point that you're 24 and the next Olympics is in 4 years' time. And you, again, also said that typically you'd be at your best when you're 28.
Yeah.
So will we be seeing you at Los Angeles for the 2028 Olympics?
Absolutely not. No, this. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the boys I went to uni with are far better athletes than me. Not on paper, but just in general, they've got great results. And I was lucky enough through COVID, I got access to all the facilities, so I got to train with. Actually, you'll probably see in the Olympics, Alex Yee, and he's a great guy, first of all. But hopefully, he will be the next Olympic champion in a few weeks. And then I think he'll also probably win LA 2028. But no, I am a long way off remotely. Yeah, it's not even a conversation, if I'm honest. But it would have been lovely to go. I think it's probably everyone's dream to go to the Olympics. I've been fortunate enough that I have from uni a lot of friends. One of my housemates is running in the 400 metres. He's a great guy, so that should be good to see. But no, I sadly will not be there. I'll definitely be there watching. And I'm going on Friday to Paris to see some people there. But no, I won't be there. But I do think it's great to go along and see what the...
I'm so jealous you're going. I'm so jealous. It feels like it's another London one because it's so close, but I'm definitely not going for it. Amazing. Well, that ties off this week's listeners' questions. So that brings us into the next section, which is the 3 pieces of advice. Now, occasionally I like to throw a spanner in the works, but today I'm going to keep it the way that it has always been. Well, I say has always been, is usually, which is where I'm going to ask you to give 3 pieces of advice for a younger version of yourself. Now, they don't have to be the same version. They can be different ages, but effectively, I want you to imagine I'm not in the room anymore. Okay. And I want to know what you would tell your younger self in 3, short bits of advice.
First of all, and I think Mum would be happy I'd said this because I didn't listen as a kid, read more. I think it's not to do with sport, but I think in general from life, whether you do read sports journalism, or you read, books, whether it's fiction, non-fiction. I think if you do that from a young age, you have such an advantage getting older and older, and it makes school easier and university easier. And then you can also find out about more of life, more of history, more of sport. And then when you do get the chance to go to uni or train or meet people, if you're interested in coaching or training, you can read tons about it, and then you can ask more detailed questions and get probably a better response because people have seen that you've taken the time to actually go into something you're passionate about. So I'd say read more, which I'm definitely working on at the moment. Number 2 is it will all work out. I think it's probably, and right now I'm in quite an in-between stage, so I'm definitely having to think about, and my girlfriend reminds me of that a lot, but it'll definitely work out. If things go wrong, that's just part of the journey. And then when things go wrong, and soon things will start to look more promising. And I think being an optimist is definitely something that you should always do, because people are there to help, and sometimes you just got to ask for that. So it's not going to happen itself. You definitely have to make it happen, whether that's in sport, in a job. But don't be afraid to ask, because it will work out, and it will work out if you put in the effort to make it work out. And third, and probably the most important thing, would be always speak to, I'm very fortunate. I've got a great family, got a great friendship network who are based all over the UK and some in Europe. So speak to them. I think you can always learn something from everyone, whether that's, even if it's, you just bump into someone who works at McDonald's or a janitor, they will have, probably an infinite amount of more wisdom than any 24-year-old will ever have. So you can always learn something from everyone. And yeah, if you're ever struggling, definitely just ask and speak to people. And I feel like especially guys with men's wealth are probably more inclined to be, the classic like macho, oh, I'm fine. And I'm very fortunate. I've never really had any mental health issues. I think definitely sports played a massive part in that. If I'm ever overthinking, I just go for a run or go to the gym, or then just, sometimes it's a brain dump, just talk everything through with someone, that's girlfriends, family, friends. But yeah, that'd be my third bit of advice. But
all very good advice, and there's some specifically new stuff there. I think the reading one's really good advice, and something that no one said before. So yeah, I back that as well, because I'm now doing it and learning so much. And I think, yeah, there's just a wealth of knowledge out there. And if you ever feel like you're getting on top of it, you're lying, because there's new books that come out literally every day. And they're just as interesting. But also asking, I guess, in talking to other people, that is a great way to find some of the best books. All the books I have read recently have all come from recommendation. I've not gone out and typed into Google anything. And so not only have I got some solid advice from other people, but that advice has probably come from a book they've then told me to read. So yeah, there we go. I mean, that then takes us into the final section of this. So we do a guest question here on this podcast as well. So the previous guest has left a question for you, and you will in turn have to leave a question for the next guest, not having any idea who they are. So this question comes from Georgia, and a bit of a backstory for you, because at the time of recording, that episode hasn't come out for you to listen to yet, but Georgia is a para rower, has gone through some absolutely outrageous injuries in her time, and has kept coming back despite what the doctor said about her never being able to walk and everything again. She's continued to come back and find herself in that boat and power on, with hopes to be at the Paralympics in 2028. So she has left this question for you, and that is, what is the proudest moment you have to date, and why is it your proudest moment?
Do you know what? I think probably getting the email through that I graduated with the first, and it's not because it's a sole academic achievement. I feel like all my friends were all my economics friends anyway, we're all working towards that. But for me, that was the combination of obviously all the hard work in library, and okay, I'm not going to sit there and say I studied all year, because I crammed like nothing on earth, but it was more a case of that was the last thing at uni I wanted to achieve. So in those 4 years, it was, representing Great Britain, do some public speaking, win a Bucks title, and obviously all the making memories with friends, going out, all of that stuff. But they were the main targets, and to top it off with the first, I was mainly celebrating. And graduation week was so special because friends, family, and it was celebrating not just the academic achievement itself, but for me it was the whole 4 years. Especially with COVID, obviously you're at uni with COVID. It wasn't exactly the most enjoyable time for everyone. Quite a bad time in probably the world's history, but yeah, that's probably my most proud moment because of everything that it encapsulated.
Brilliant. Which then leads us on to me needing a question from you to the next guest, not having a clue anything about them, what they do, and why they're going to be on the podcast.
Yeah.
What would you like to ask? Now, I will also say it doesn't have to be serious. We have had questions that have been quite interesting previously. So if you want to ask a bit more of a silly question, you're more than welcome to. But if you have a question in mind already, then go ahead.
Yeah. So my question would be, given every single decision you've ever made in your whole life, you've made billions or trillions of decisions, which has got you to a point in time, which is the present now. So even us right now made decisions to be here. What is the one decision you think that changed your life the most or had the most profound effect?
God, that is a great question. I feel like that's a bit of a can of worms there as well, because there's probably going to be a few that they discuss. I like that question. Okay, cool. So guys, if you were actually interested, I should have said, in George's story that I mentioned very briefly, just jump back an episode. It's available exactly where you've managed to find this episode as well. But if you want to come back and listen to Jonny's question get answered, then come back next week. We'll still be here, and we'll have a person to answer that with, hopefully, a very interesting decision that was made. But that rounds us off for this episode. Jonny, you have been absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for talking us through A, your journey, but B, some of the tough parts of it. Where can people find you and support anything that you're currently working on?
I'm not really on many socials apart from Instagram. So it's just Jonny_Jackson1. That's my Instagram for anyone that wants to follow that stuff. It's not too interesting, if I'm honest, but yeah.
I'm sure people may want to come in and check out what you've done in the past. And I mean, if anyone's got any questions, they might want to just sling them into your DMs and see if they can get a response. But likewise,
say one thing.
Of course.
Isaac actually has asked me to do an ultra, but there's a group of us at the moment that are signing up for all sorts of stupid events. We did Snowdon, a 24-hour ultra up Snowdon last weekend and a half ago, and it was absolutely crazy. But if anyone wants to do or interested in doing any stupid ultra events or crazy races, get in touch, because there'll be a few of us doing some stupid things in the future. So if anyone's wants to do it with people or have people to go with and stuff, by all means reach out.
Fantastic. Another thing I would say there as well is, don't necessarily be scared because someone of Jonny's level is going to be doing an ultra, and an ultra is actually a relatively slow thing. It's all about just not stopping to a degree. So
it's more mental. Yeah,
if you've got any background in any sport, then I would definitely recommend getting in touch, because saying that you've done an ultra is actually pretty cool. So
don't think that the day after.
Oh, absolutely not. If you can walk.
There's a very bad video of me and my brother trying to walk to a train station, and you went to off the train station where you get dropped off to where you go through the barriers, which is about 30 meters. It took 17 minutes to get across to the barrier, round and up and over which should take a normal person 2 minutes, and that was post the ultra. We were in a very bad way, and if you'd seen us, you'd have thought quite a lot of things were wrong with us the way we were walking. So
you're not selling it to them. You've got to pretend
I'm not trying to sell it.
That doesn't happen. You'll be absolutely fine. But if you also, if you're not necessarily particularly interested in doing one, but you want to see how Jonny gets along doing more of them, then that is another reason to go and drop a follow and catch on. So if you've already forgotten what the @ is, don't worry. It's going to be tagged down in the description of any of the content that we put up on Instagram, TikTok, whatever, but also in the description of the podcast. So just have a look down there. Likewise, you've done a very good job of finding this episode if you're currently listening. But if you're looking for any of the other social media, you can find us at mindsets_podcast. Would love it if you could drop a follow while you're there, maybe a few likes, shares, let all your friends know. We're trying to tell some of the most interesting and inspiring stories in sport. And we're trying to keep that not necessarily specific to one sport, but if someone's interesting and they've got a story to tell, then we'll tell it. So again, Jonny, thank you so much for coming on today and telling your story.
Thanks very much for having me.
And I guess I will see all of you guys in the next episode. We'll be right back.